Hey guys, Ruben Lara here, and I just want to take a few minutes to show a little more about how to use my Sculpt Brush, which is available on my Gumroad store. I really love this Sculpt Brush because it helps me focus in on one decision at a time when I'm roughing in early stages, and even when I'm polishing off things, and it just contributes sort of a nice painterly effect. All right, so I have this work in progress here of a couple of girls looking at their iPhone. And you can see how I've already started massing in the volumes here of the girl on the left. And I've just started laying in some tones here on the girl on the right, in the hat and things like that. I'm using the cat's tongue brush, which is just a modified version of the oil paint flat brush. And then of course here's my Sculpt brush. One thing I like to point out is when I'm using the oil paint flat brush, to make sure that you take advantage of the mixed ground color on and off. By default, mixed ground color is on, and it really makes for a brush that's really mixy and fantastic to use, and I really love it as I'm kind of modeling these forms out. But when I want to get a very definite plane in, sometimes the mixed ground color can get in your way because it's mixing, and I'm not getting that direct darkness that I like. Maybe a better example is trying to rough in a dark area for this eyeball. So if I just pick this local color and go darker, I'm not quite getting the darkness of my color that I've chosen, and so I find I'm having to just go over and over and over until I get the darkness I want. Whereas when mixed ground color is off, I can pick that local color, go dark, and immediately we get the full strength of that darkness. It's not mixing. I like to point that out because I almost want to separate the defining of the planes with the mixing of the paint, and this is a great way to use this Sculpt brush, is kind of let this oil paint flat brush do what it does best, which is it's fast and has a really nice shape to it. So at the beginning, I'm using this as basically just kind of like more of a gouache brush, where I'm coming in here and identifying areas of this face by just big tonal values. So I might come in here and let's just kind of brush in some darkness here. I'm using this pretty opaque. I'm going to bump it up to 90%. Just a real opaque kind of laying down of these planes, right? Then I can come in with the Sculpt brush, and because the Sculpt brush doesn't really apply color at lighter pressures, it just blends. I'm not constantly color picking just to blend these planes together. In fact, I'll just use this blue area out here as an example. I might be on a really orange, saturated orange color, and I can still just really, if I press lightly, I'm just blending these two tones together. So not when I start to press a little bit harder that I start to bring in some of that color, which is a real nice way to work. Because let's say I do want to bring in some warmth here on the edges. As this color turns, let's just take something like this. If I press really hard, I get that color. But at the beginning, I can just really push this paint around and do exactly what the brush says it's doing, which is sculpting these forms. So I'll work with a little bit smaller brush here, pull these forms in, out, and it just has a real nice way of getting a painterly look pretty early on in the process, as long as my my planes are set. So I'll just kind of pull these colors in a little bit more, and I may go a little bit smaller here and just kind of push and pull. And I'm just going to keep moving between my cat's tongue brush and this Sculpt brush to keep laying in these planes. So let's say I come in here with this and just a little bit of zoom into this sub view a little more. All right, pull that in, and let's just take this color and start roughing in a little bit of this lip tone. Again, having this set to mix the ground color off is really letting me just drop in these tones pretty directly, right? And then I'm going to worry about mixing them later. Of course, there's lots of ways to work. This is not the only way, but I don't know. I just find it's a pretty fast and relatively direct way of kind of massing these tones in really quick. Get these eyelashes in. And I always have my line work on a separate layer. In this case, I've called it source because I have an action set up where my F1 and F2, or rather my F3 and F4, kind of turn my line work on on and off as needed. So as I'm painting right over a flattened version of this of the line work, so I kind of get that mix of the lines and the paint together. But I always have my line work on top just in case I need to go back and reference that again. So all right, let me grab this, cool it down a little bit, kind of coming into shadow. Same here, right? Come back to my Sculpt Brush and just really kind of play around with those forms. Again, I'm still going to come in and you know, paint a lot more, but it just helps early on to you know, to get those forms defined. So especially, of course, there's a lot to be done on that face still, but let's go ahead and just quickly move to kind of these big broad areas as well, just so we can see how quickly we can start massing some of this in. So we'll drop this down, get some nice deep blues in there, shadows, these big plane changes, right? And kind of start describing our background. This is just going to be on white here. Run some kind of lighter tone. All right, and describe a little bit of light up here. Again, I'm just kind of putting in not entire planes of color, just patches that I'm going to go ahead and blend with my Sculpt Brush. All right, so let me grab the Sculpt Brush, a little bit larger. I'm working at about 80% on this. And look how nicely it just kind of pushes and pulls those forms around. So I'm not really painting with the Sculpt Brush. I'm just dropping in large kind of patches of local color and then kind of finding these lost and hard edges. Get a little bit larger. Again, kind of this concept of breaking my decisions down in discrete pieces. So I'm not really thinking about color right now. I'm just thinking about the values and, you know, and how these colors are relating to each other. Let me grab this blue again here. I'll rough in some of these shapes. So it really keeps me drawing as well. And you get the idea. Come back to the Sculpt Brush, a bit smaller. So pretty quickly we've been able to kind of rough out the shape, and maybe I have a little bit too much white milkiness in there, so that's okay. I'll just grab my cat's tongue brush, and maybe now I'll go ahead and put mixed ground color on, and I can just go back here and, you know, keep painting. The nice thing is when mixed ground color is on with these oil paint cat's tongue, or this oil paint flat brush, which I've called cat's tongue in this case because of the tip, we're still getting some of that nice mixing, right? So the Sculpt Brush is giving me that large overall painterliness, and then I can, you know, keep mixing that paint as needed. Anyway, you get the idea. Nice painterly strokes, and it's a great way to just move these colors around. So let's see how we can also use the Sculpt Brush on something like coloring for a graphic novel, not just oil painting. The whole point is that we're using this Sculpt Brush to disrupt an edge, right? To find some kind of lost edge and add some interest to our forms and planes. This is a character called Tink, designed by my good friend Mark Page. Awesome character, awesome story. Definitely go check out his Instagram, Mark J. Page, and he's developed a bunch of other concept work and comic book panels for this. But I've just done a quick ink job over his great drawing there, and have a little folder with flats with the body and the eyes, so something pretty straightforward. I'm going to go ahead and color this using a process I like to use, which I'm going to go over in another video tutorial, so don't be confused about what I'm doing. I've recorded an action called Add Light Layers that basically adds everything I need to light this character. So I'm just going to grab these and I'm going to put the body inside this folder as well. Okay, and I'll connect these to the body so everything's good to go. All right, so I'm going to just very quickly run through this and add a bunch of shadows and lights. Okay, so basically what I've done here is I have a few layers of curves that I've preset, and it's pretty straightforward. There's a shadow layer, a deep shadow layer, a bounce light, and some highlights. And all I've done is used my lasso fill tool to go ahead and just do some quick fill selections. But now what I want to do is kind of soften some of these edges. And I'm going to use my Sculpt Brush for this. So I'll start with my shadows and just come in here and just start blending in and out of these little areas. So some of it I want to be, hard edge shadow, and some of it I don't. So I'm just kind of, finding these little opportunities to, lose that edge. Again, give it a little bit of texture. Could also do this with a soft airbrush, but I like the painterly feel that we're getting, with this Sculpt Brush. I'm not blowing everything out into a big, smudge area. I want to kind of have a hard edge and somewhat of a lost ending on that as well. Coming to the deep shadows, maybe do something similar. Look how, it is, it does make it a little more painterly, but at the same time, it's adding a lot of complexity to this color work as well. The bounce light, I just roughed in using the cat's tongue brush just to get a little bit of that edge on it. Give that nice little bounce light. Again, that Sculpt Brush kind of just brings that color in and out, and really it's only affecting the transparency values of that, but it's just disrupting it in just the right way. And we'll come to the highlights as well. This particular character, I'm kind of expressing it as kind of a hammered look a little bit, right? Come back into those deep shadows. Something like that. I really like this method. Again, I will go into depth about this method in another tutorial, but it allows me to go ahead and just shift, the color of some of this stuff as well. So if I want, that shadow to have a greener cast or a bluer cast, I can easily do that with these curves, which is really nice. And then I'll come in here with some specular and maybe just grab my cat's tongue brush and something a little bit. Like this. Again, kind of using the same principle as we did on the painting. Laying down some direct color. Again, I'm just doing a real quick job on this. Especially with some of these kind of like really bright speculars here, might want to grab that Sculpt Brush again and just kind of destroy that little edge there. Okay, so fairly quickly we've kind of roughed in some color there. Let's add some Ambient Glow. I'll grab my airbrush and let's see. Do something like that. Gives a little more of that a direct light area, and that's it. So again, we could spend a lot more time on this, and this was just one direction for this lighting, but the Sculpt Brush, the disruption that the Sculpt Brush gives us, it just makes for a really nice painterly effect that even for some simple line work can add some nice complexity to. All right, well, I hope you enjoyed that, and I hope you download my Sculpt Brush. It's a lot of fun to use, and I can't wait to see the different ways in which you use it as well. Happy painting and enjoy.